So we're starting Per Gimel of Nefesh HaChayim Shar Dalit. We started a little bit the first few lines, that he now finally explains what he thinks is Torah Lishma. He spoke so much about learning Torah Lishma. It's a whole chapter of Pirkei Avot starts Perek Vav, which is, by the way, a rabbinic part of the Mishnah, but it was not originally part of Pirkei Avot. It's only 5 prakim. As it starts, Tanu Rabbanan B'Lshon Mishnah. Chazal taught in the language of the Mishnah, so it's not really a Tanaic work. It was a later addition. What starts with the memra of Rabbi Meir is Tanaic memras that call Halomet Torah Lishma Zochel Lidvarim Harbe. When you learn Torah Lishma, you're zoche to lots of things. So what does it mean, Torah Lishma? So you mentioned, obviously, just a recap of the machloket that was going on specifically in the time of Reb Chaim Itzkovitz, Reb Chaim Volozhiner, as we know him, that many of the Hasidic leaders, they were pushing for several different explanations in Torah Lishma, which did not fit the explanation of Chazal in the mind of Reb Chaim. Therefore, he wrote this perek, this chapter specifically. They felt that Torah Lishma means learning with devekut. You have to be davek in your mind, attached to Hashem, and that's what Lishma means. Or there were some that held that you're not allowed to be enjoying the learning, because that, at least, that enjoyment is not part of the mitzvah of the Torah. So therefore, that's your benefit, personal benefit that you're having is not Lishma. So we already explained that he's not going to talk about that, but we explained how you see from the Rishonim, Rabbeinu Avraham Minahar in Masachet Nedarim, Daf Memchet, that he clearly says that learning Torah is supposed to be with Simcha. It's part and parcel of learning Torah, is the Gishmak that we have, and he proved it from the fact that if you make a neder, there the Gemara says to not have Hana, for instance, from Reuben, then if you have a communal Sefer Torah, you cannot learn from that Sefer Torah because part of it belongs to Reuben, and that's Hana. And Rabbeinu Avraham Minahar, one of the Rishonim, says, wait a second, but that's mitzvot lav lehanot nitu. We have a klal in Shas that when you do a mitzvah, even if you have Hana'ah, that's not considered Hana'ah. So why is it asur? And he says that's only for mitzvot ma'asiyot. You put tefillin, you do something physical, but the mitzvah, that part and parcel of it, is to have a gishmak, have enjoyment. That mitzvah, of course, you're supposed to have hana'ah from it. And it says learning Torah is that very thing. We added that you see from Gemara in Chagigat after Dvav that it says hayu hadvarim smechim kenetinatan mehar Sinai. You see that the netina of the Torah was with simcha. It's part and parcel of the netinat Torah, of the learning of the Torah. And we mentioned how my Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal's great-great-grandfather, the first Slonim Rebbe, Rabbi Avraham, this is Rav Weinberg's, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, Rav Noach Weinberg's great-great-grandfather, that Rabbi Avraham Weinberg, the first Rabbi of Slonim, in his Sefer Yesod HaAvodah, he writes that Lishma means devekut. But again, here, Reb Chaim basically knocked it out of existence, and now he explains his own understanding that ha'emet ki inyan lishma perush l'shem Torah. It means l'shem Torah. You're learning it in order to learn Torah. You're learning it in order to understand the depth of the Torah. That is what Hashem wants. That's how you connect with Ribono Shel Olam. And he brought the words of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, on the Gemara in Nedarim Daf Samech Bet, that says Rabbi Lazar ben Rabbi Sadok says Aseh devarim l'shem pa'alan, and then daber bahen lishman. And it said daber bahen, the dibur part of learning of the words of the Torah has to be lishman, not l'shem pa'alan. It's not l'shem Hashem, that some sort of devekut or some sort of abstract idea. It's lishman, very grounded, feet on the floor type of feet on the ground idea, simple idea of learning Torah in order to be having a dedication of understanding the Torah, what it says. Right? Was steht, as they say in Yiddish. I want to understand what exactly it says here. And Reb Chaim went to prove that, you see, many topics of the Torah are very complex, very difficult to understand. If you're thinking of devekut, then you cannot You cannot be focused 100% of your brain power on understanding those difficult and complicated halachot, right? So we mentioned that the halacha has it, the way halachot tefillin goes is that when you are learning or you're davening Shemona Esrei, you don't need to have awareness of the tefillin that you're wearing. Rest of the time, you need to always have awareness of I'm wearing tefillin. It's asur to be mesiach dat from tefillin. That's why you have some special sidurim that they have the word tefillin written up there, or some people have a laminated small piece of paper that they stick in and sticking out of the sidur says tefillin on it. Why? All of that because of the halacha that you have to be mindful. But in the time, the duration of the tefillah and limud Torah, you're absolved from this. Why? Because you have to be delving in that thing. Tefillah, you're standing in front of Hashem. You can be focused on anything but speaking with Hashem. That's when you're speaking to Hashem. When you're learning, Hashem is speaking with you. Right? So you have to be completely focused on understanding what is He telling me. What is the Gemara saying? What is the Mishnah saying? That is considered Lishman. As we mentioned, that by itself brings a person to Devekut to Hashem. Right? It's not that Devekut brings you to Hashem, but Devekut to the Torah brings you to Devekut to Hashem. And we mentioned the words of Zohar HaKadosh, that Yisrael ve'oraita ve'kuchabrichu chadhu, that we sing it on Simchat Torah. Doesn't mean that all three of them, Israel equals Torah equals Hashem. No. It means Yisrael ve'oraita, kama, ve'kuchabrichu chadhu. Israel together with Torah, with your attachment with the Torah, you become one with Hashem. As we mentioned in Gemara in Shabbat, that says, Anochi, which is the first part of Torah speaking about the mitzvot. Bereshit starts with bet because it's the physical world. Physical world starts with bet because everything is double, it's creation, it's a nifsat, it's a murkav. I'm saying a lot of ideas in very short, trying to recap, but the Torah of the mitzvot starts from Anochi. That's why it starts with Aleph. Aleph is aluf, means master, which means Adon, and the way the Aleph is written is a Vav with two Yuds, which is 26, the name of Havaya Baruch Hu, right? So the Gemara says, Anochi stands, notarikun, Rashet Tevot, for Ana, Nafshai, Katvid Yavid. I'm hereby writing my essence and giving it to you. As we mentioned, there are two words in Lashon HaKodesh that mean Ani, means me. One is Anochi, one is Ani. And as the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, and also the Maharal explain both, there are no synonyms in Lashon HaKodesh. There are no synonymous words. Every word means something different. So what's the difference between Anochi and Ani? Ani means me in relationship with you. Me when I'm relating with the world around me. That's me. It's not my essence, it's how I deal with outside. Anochi means my essence. You want to know what my essence, core essence is? That's Anochi. So when Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that Anochi is Ana Nafshai Katvit Yavid. I am hereby giving you my essence. The Torah is my essence. You're attached to Torah, you're attaching to my essence. The Gemara, which I don't think I mentioned last week, in Bava Batra Daf Yudara, the Gemara says when Moshe Rabbeinu went up 40 days to get the Torah, so the Luchot were 6 by 6 by 3, right? So it says Moshe was holding 2 tefachim. Kaviyachol, Hashem was holding 2 tefachim, and 2 tefachim were in the middle of the Torah itself. So what does it mean? That they were pulling? So who's stronger? Of course not. So what's the meaning of the Gemara? The deeper meaning of the Gemara is 2/3 is you. 2/3 is Hashem. It's untouchable. The way you hold on to Hashem is holding on to the Torah, because the Torah is always attached to the essence of Hashem. It's a matter of us deciding to connect ourselves with the essence of Torah. Then you're, by definition, by extension, you're connected with Hashem, right? So that's Ana Nafshai Kat V'Diyavid, right? Now Rashi has a different perush. So this is where we left off last week. V'Rashi Zal Girsa Acheret Hayta Lo Sham. She has a different girsa. V'daber bahen lishman l'shem shamayim. He says, not lishman. He says, daber bahen l'shem shamayim. Lachen piresh, therefore Rashi explains a little bit differently. Shetehe kol kavanatcha l'shamayim. That all of your kavanah should be, all your focus should be to Hashem, to shamayim, which does not mean necessarily exactly what Reb Chaim was saying. They should be lishman of the Torah understanding. And Rashi, by the way, is consistent. If you take a look at Rashi, at least the way we have it, it's two different girsot, if I remember, in the sixth parak of Pirkei Avot, Rashi there also says, Kol halomet Torah lishma zocher lidvarim harbe. Rashi there mentions that this is speaking about doing L'Shem Shamayim, and he explains, Velo L'Shem Kavod, that they should call me a rabbi, or I should have any status, any ulterior motive is pasul. As we're going to see, Reb Chaim says that is just negating certain kavanot that are pasul. It's not disagreeing that you have to have kavanah to understand the Torah, right? So let's see his words. Omnam inyan upirosh lishma shamru razal b'chol makom. What Rabotenu Zichram Ruach mean when they say lishma in every place? Vaday shegam Rashi zal yefaresh befirush harosh. Rashi also agrees with the Rosh. That means you have to understand whatever it says. You have to focus on understanding a certain dedication to the understanding of the Torah. And that's what lishma means. When he says L'Shem Shamayim, Rashi explains, don't have kavanah that I'm going to get my smicha and I'm going to be called a rabbi. Not only I'm going to be a doctor, but I'm going to get my smicha online, and now I'm going to be... But no, there are some good ones. There are very, very valid programs. There are some very difficult things to pass. But that should not be the kavanah. Kavanah is, I'm getting the tests because that's the only way I could measure myself without being in a chabura or in a yeshiva, how I'm really doing, right? That's how I gauge where I'm holding in learning. That's a good thing, right? But aside from that, whoever saw the smicha of Harav Ovadia? Or Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim has an interesting story. He needed to travel somewhere, and the rabbinate would get an easy pass. I don't remember the details exactly, and that was the only way for him to travel to where he needed to go and to do whatever he needed to do. So he asked a question from Reb Chaim Ozer Grudinsky, the Gadol Hador of Europe in Vilna. He said, they want to know if I'm a rabbi or not. So he never got a smicha. He was the Gadol Hador, and so Reb Chaim, instead of answering him if it's mutar to say he's a rabbi or not, he just he wrote and mailed him a smicha. So that takes care of the issue. So whoever asked the Chafetz Chaim if you have smicha, whoever asked Chacham Obadia or Ragichav or all the Geonim, the smicha means, I half jokingly say smicha in Hebrew now means a blanket, right? So there's a smicha. There are three different smichas. There's a smicha you give to a cow, smicha before the korban, right? There's a smicha that you give to a person who wants to sleep, and there's a smicha that you give to a person that became a leading Torah scholar. Depends who's under the smicha, right? Is it the sleeping person, is it the cow, or is it the Rav? So that's really what in Farsi it sounds better. It's a smicha you give to a Rav, a smicha you give to a Gav. So that's sorry for that. I understand that Gav means a cow. So that really is the value of smicha is not because now I'm so on now people are going to respect me. It's a way we connect with Ribbon Shalom, and the Torah is the biggest, greatest single tool to deeply connect with Ribbon Shalom. It's His essence, and we get to connect with it. Okay. So that's what he says. V'gam Rashi Zalkan en kavanato devekut. Rashi, don't make a mistake to think that Rashi means that you're going to have devekut. Ela de'ati la'afuke. So he says this, and he's not going to bring it, but what I told you is going to prove his point. De'ati la'afuke shelo yehel limudo l'shem, that his limud should not be l'shem kintur vegeut. That it shouldn't be for gava. And it also should not be for finding problems with the Torah, right? That's obvious. If you're reading it to become a Bible critic, or to debate the frum people or the rabbi, so then of course that's the least, the lowest of the low. But even someone that learns the Shem Kavod, that he should get Kavod, people should respect him, and so on and so forth, that also is is shlo lishma. So as we mentioned, Rashi himself clearly mentions these points on his perush. The way I remember, you can check it out to double check to make sure on his in his perush on Masechet Avot. Okay.
The person fulfilled the mitzvah of learning Torah. He did it for Gava or any other reason.
So,
or it was just on the lower level.
So again, that's a good point. We have the Gemara. The Gemara says, "Leolam yasok adam beTorah afilu shelo lishma," right? Shemitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. The Rabbi HaChayim is going to discuss it as well. It's Machloket Rishonim. Rabbeinu Yitzchak min Narvona, I think, was one of the Gedolei Rishonim, that he actually holds it's Machloket of the Tanaim in the Gemara, and that's according to the Tana that holds it's good to do it that way, but the Yehuda disagrees and he holds is mutav shelo nivra, is mutav shenapoch shilyato betoch mea. That's he holds is it's a machloket tanaim that some hold it's better that this person would not be even born and would not be created to learn Torah like this, and others disagree and say, but this is Rabbeinu Yitzchak min Arbona, the Rishonim. Others disagree and they say both of them coexist. It's not a machloket tanaim. Obviously, it's not a high madrega, right? And he himself is going to deal with it partially as well. But it's good because it brings you to. It's still good to do it because it brings you to the ultimate good that you're going to learn Torah Lishma. So it itself may not be valuable in and of itself. Mutav shelo nivra, but because hamaor sheba machziro lemutav, the light of the Torah brings you back to good. Therefore, do it. But if you're learning lekanter, if you're learning to critique the Torah and to go against it, then that brings nothing, right? Then is mamash shelo lishma, it's not worth anything, right? So we'll get to your question a little bit later.
Rabbi, while we're on the question, really quickly, sorry. What do we consider learning Torah? When you say a person fulfills mitzvah learning Torah, what is it? A person goes in the car, he has a car ride, turns on a lecture by a mantra on jealousy. Did he fulfill that 1 hour? Did he fulfill the mitzvah of Torah learning?
Okay, so we spoke a little bit about this, about learning Tehillim, saying psukim of Tanakh, or even Tehillim. You mentioned that the Midrash Shochar Tov in the beginning says that David HaMelech asked that learning Tehillim should be like Negaim v'Oalot. And he claimed that maybe it was not answered. Who knows? Hashem answered him. We mentioned that you see from Rabbeinu Yehuda Bar Yakar, the Rebbe of Ramban, that Hitake was answered, and learning to them is Take very important, and it is considered like Negaim ve'Ohalot, and we saw that the Chida understands like that in his Perush on Tehillim Yosef Teilot. But there is a concept of Limud Torah versus Bitul Torah, what we call be'echut. There is Bitul Torah be'kamut, that you have time and you're just not learning, right? But then there is Bitul Torah be'echut, in quality, that you are learning, but you're not learning what you should be learning, right? What you could be learning high stuff and becoming a huge Talmid Chacham. If Chacham Obadia would spend his life mastering Tehillim with all the Mefarshim. What a chaval, right? He changed the world. And that was what he could do. He wrote Sfarim that forever are going to be the pinnacle of Sifriya Yisraeli. So that was his koach. If he would do anything less than that, I always give a mashal. It applies to this as well. But I usually use it for involving oneself only in physicality when you could be doing so much spiritual. So this farmer saved the life of the king, and they set a day to honor him and appreciate his service to the king, and they wanted to give him a F-35, right? 35, 36, whichever it is, right? They wanted to give him one of this fighter jets. In his name, it will be whatever. He comes there and he sees this massive plane, and he's looking at it, and it's like, and he starts running back to he came with his carriage and his donkey and whatever. He starts running back to his donkey. He says, "What do you do? Where are you going?" He says, well, this is amazing. It solves my problem. I want to carry the season of fertilizing, and I have a problem. I have to go back and forth so many times to carry fertilizers, right? This thing is massive. I could put all the fertilizer that I want in this. I just have one kasha. I don't know if my donkey is strong enough to pull this thing. So I'm going to bring it to check. So the guy says, Shotei Sheba'olam, fool. This thing, you push a button, it goes vertically up, and it could go destroy cities and towns. And you know what this is? You could go, you don't carry fertilizers with this. That's exactly our story. We have a neshama eloki. We have the power. V'tachasireu me'at me'elohim. V'chavod v'hadar ta'atireu. Hashem has given us a neshama that's a little bit less than malachim. In many ways, is higher than malachim. You could get to Hashem, attach yourself to devekut to Hashem. And what do? We carry, pounds and pounds of fertilizer, kind of a fertilizer machine, right? Chas v'shalom. That's for someone that. But in quality of learning is the same thing. You have to know, what plane do I have? If I have a F-14, F-16, I could do. What's the maximum capacity of this machine I've been given? So a person has different things. Some people are smarter. Some people have a better memory, more analytic, more to that level Hashem wants from them. We brought the midrash last week that Hashem is going to ask, right? We spoke about the Gemara in Shabbat Daf Lamed Aleph of what they ask you, and the contrast of that Gemara in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. But the midrash says clearly, Hashem says, okay, did you learn Chumash? Did you learn Mishnayot? The Toseftot, the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, Halacha, Zohar, Sodot HaTorah, Merkava, Maseh Bereshit. Everything is expected depending on how much he was capable. So it has to be a level of, and same thing is with, for instance, the Mishnah says, in 48 different ways the Torah is niknet, right? Torah niknet. And one of them is mi'ut shena, sleep less. What does that mean exactly? Right? So in yeshiva, some people, they sleep less, until they're falling apart. Right? And then they have this question, to me, the Tamim question, what does it mean? How much do I sleep? The answer is clear. You have to figure out how much sleep you need to be completely sharp, 100%. Because if you're oversleeping, you're doing Bitul Torah. And if you're undersleeping, if you're not sleeping enough, you're also doing Bitul Torah. If you're oversleeping, it's Pashut, right? If you need 7 and you're sleeping 8, then you're wasting that 1 hour, right? But if you need 7 and you sleep 6, then the whole day afterwards, you're not going to be sharp. And all of that quality and quantity of Torah that you lose, right? If you're sharp, in 1 hour you could do 10 pages. Right? If you're not sharp, you do 8 pages. So that, and the quality is not even the same. So that quantity and quality that was lost is all Bitul Torah. That you do because you pushed yourself more. So the short answer, this is the long answer. The short answer is, it really depends on the person. So you could find a person that's not more capable than that. They can't do anything better than that. Or you have a situation that you can't do any better. You're driving, so whatever it is, the focus is not 100%. But if someone, is doing Yarkud Yosef, and you could be doing Sugyot of Tur Shulchan Aruch and this, with all due respect to the great job that was done in Kitzur Sfarim, this person, if you could be a lamdan and learn be'iyun and master halachot of Shulchan Aruch in that way, so that's what's expected from him, right? And there's time for learning through Kitzur Sfarim as well. You have to have guidance in how to. Chacham Obadia spends a lot of time, for instance, in the Ptichatu Yabia Omer, to explain the Limud Torah, the hierarchies, and so on. And in some place, without mentioning the name, he takes on the concept of learning Kochim, even though the Chafetz Chaim Alav Shalom was very much for it, and the Brisker Rav and so on, all the brisk yeshivot, their primary focus is on Seder Kochim, and it's amazing. It's a lot of koach there. But at the same time, he says, if you don't know basic halachot of brachot and Shabbat and kashrut and so on and so forth, daily things that you need to know, and you're doing those, so then something seriously is wrong. The priority, the hierarchy of of prioritizing what the person learns and what he should be knowing, obviously, is something important. That answers to some extent. And that's why the Gemara ends right there. This is going back in the Gemara that he said before in Sukkah Daf Kafchet, speaking about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shelo hiniach, that he didn't leave anything that he didn't study, didn't leave anything that he didn't know. Mashneemar lehanchil ohava yesh. Right? The Pasuk in Mishlei says that I have much to give to people who love me. שמבואר העניין שם בכל אותה הפרשה שהוא מאמר התורה הקדושה עצמה אשר בחוץ תרונה. This is really a play. It doesn't say this, but this is a Perek Aleph in Mishlei. The very beginning of Mishlei, the Pasuk says Chochmot bachutz tarona. That there is so much applications, and the vastness of Torah basically covers everything. It's amazing. One of the Talmidim of the Vilna Gaon, one of the foremost Talmidim, was the Pat HaShulchan. So Pat HaShulchan, in Hakdama Shniya, I think it is, of the Sefer Pat HaShulchan, he writes that the Gaon, at some point when he finished, I think, his Perush and Shir HaShirim, he made a private Suda with him and the very close few individuals, and he explained to them how much he has achieved through learning the Torah and the Sodot and so on. And he said that through song, right? Shir HaShirim is a song of songs. But he says if you understand the sodot of shir, the inyan of shir, you could kill and you could be mechayemetim with the sodot of song. So it's the things that are, and he says all kinds of chokhmot. It's famous that this probably most that you know that the Vilna Gaon actually went out of his way to learn all of the chokhmot aside from two. One was kishuf because the tumah that was involved with it, and the other one was chokhmat harfuah, to become a doctor, because he felt that if you are a doctor, then you have achrayut to the verapo yerapeh, that you have to, anyone that is in need, you have to actually take care of them, and that would take away drastically from his esek with Torah, and he should issue that to learn. So therefore, he never involved with all the other chokhmot. He went and he learned, because the Torah has aspects in every single thing in the world. The vastness of Torah, and each one of those elements is a part of your hakara of Hashem. A deeper understanding of the Torah gives you automatically a deeper understanding and connection with Hashem. Okay. וליתן שכר טוב לכל ההוגה ועוסק בה מחמת אהבתה עצמה. Mamash hanu leosif ba lekach upilpul, and he says even that is leosif ba lekach upilpul. It's not to learn just simply; it's to have lekach and pilpul, to understand the basic, but also pilpul, the depth of understanding. I may have alluded to this before, but unlike what people think, that Bekiut means Gemara Rashi, I learned Gemara Rashi, right? And it has become, to some people, another way of saying, I don't have to really understand everything. It's Bekiut Seder. Come on, I can't get stuck on every question. If you would be learning this Be'iyun, then yeah. Bekiut does not mean that. Bekiut means, okay, you're not learning all the Rashbas and all the Ritbas and all the Rands and Rambans and so on. I'm learning Gemara Rashi, but I have to understand Gemara Rashi. Why does Rashi say this? How does the Cheshbon of Sugya make sense at the end of the page? I have to know. If you're not clear about that, that is a chisaron in the learning in essence. That's not called Bekiut. Actually, Bekiut means to be Baki, literally translated, right? You have to know it well. But the difference is, well, we understand that we can't learn in depth with all the Rishonim. Like the Gemara says, in Shabbat, in memory of Rabbi Akiva, it says, "Lemigmar v'hadar lemispar." First finish the knowledge of the basic things, and then come back to do it with yun, with more depth and so on. Even you should know, even the Reb Chaim Brisker's son, he finished the entire Shas at the age 18, right? So one of the friends of Reb Chaim told him, he said, I thought you guys is a focus on Lamdut and so on. He said, yeah, but in order to have Lamdut, you have to know Shas first. Right? You have to first finish Shas. And he said, the 18-year-old, he said, okay, now that I finished it once, now I could spend time on trying to understand it. So that's Bikut versus Iyun. But it doesn't give excuse to say, well, I don't have to deal with this question that I don't understand in the page because it's Bikut, right? That's the part that he says, Leosif ba lekach upilpul, and that's Ohavai. The Ahava is, I have to understand it. The details matter, right? When a couple is engaged, every little detail counts, right? When you want to give her or him a gift, right, it has to match this color and what. Okay, all of those are details, and the love is seen in the details and the interest that you have. I give you an example. The father comes from a tennis match. He's thirsty, and he asks for a cup of water from the son. Right. So 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, the son says, "Oh, my father asked for water," so he goes to the faucet, opens the water, or to the fridge. It's filtered water, whatever it is. Takes it, runs to the father, bechavud. Good. You have a second scenario. The son says, "My father is heat sensitive. He must be thirsty to no end, and he's a big guy. So I go get the biggest crystal and wash it with shiny, flawless. And he goes takes the Fuji water, opens it the better one, and puts ice in it, and puts a plate underneath it, and brings it with a box of Kleenex. The father didn't ask for any of those things. What do those details show? They show love and care. Much more so than the bringing of the water itself, which is what he asked for, because the details are a show of love. So a person that wants to understand the details, I didn't understand this thing. I want to understand it. That is lo ahavai, lahanchil lo ahavai yesh, right? The ahava is seen in clarifying the details and making sure a person understands. So now we start the Perek Dalet of Shar Dalet. Omnam vadai efshar lomar. Here Rab Chaim says, okay, I knocked all of the other understandings or misunderstandings of the concept of Lishma. Now let me clarify one very important thing, what I don't mean to say. Says Rab Chaim, Chas v'shalom, one should think that I'm suggesting that Yirat Shamayim is not important. Chalila to think like that. Of course you have to have Yirat Shamayim when you learn Torah, right? Of course, that's pashut that you have to have Taharat HaMachshava, Taharat HaLev, and Yirat Shamayim. Vadai de'i efshar lomar she'en tzarich le'inyan esek HaTorah shum tohar machshava v'yirat Hashem. Chalila. Of course, it's not sayable that you don't need any Taharat HaMachshava, clarity of mind, cleanness, the holiness of your heart and your mind, and Yirat Shamayim, and proper fear and interpretation, the awe of Ribono Shalom. Share Mishnah Shel Mashayin. It's a Beferish Mishnah. Im en yira, en chokhmah. If you don't have yira, you don't have chokhmah, right? Really, you could even say much more than this. The pasuk says. This is actually interesting. There is a discrepancy between what Shlomo HaMelech says and what his father David HaMelech says. Right? Right. So David HaMelech says, Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem, Sechel Tov L'chol Hashem. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, in Perek Tet, I think it is, he says, Tchilat Chochma Yirat Hashem, V'dat Kedoshim Bina. That's the pasuk. So the Maral picks on this. I think it's in the very beginning of Netiv HaYir'ah in Netivot Olam of the Maral. So, Zok the Maral, what's the difference between what David HaMelech says and what Shlomo HaMelech says? The Maral says an amazing thing. It says, Tchila and Reshit, again, there's no synonyms. Tchila is one thing, Reshit is a different thing. Writes the Maral, Tchila means the beginning of one unit, one thing. There's the beginning, there's this phone, this is the beginning of it, this is the end of it. But it's not two separate things. It cannot be two separate things. The word tchila is not mentioned for that. Reshit means the first piece, right? Reshit arisotechem. Reshit bikura admatecha tavi bet Hashem. different fruits. You take the Rashid, the beginning, the first ones, and you bring it to Hashem. But they're different units. Techila means, we say Techilat Derech. It's beginning of the path. It's all one path, right? So when it says Rashid Chokhmah, with Techilat Chokhmah are two different things. When Shlomo says Techilat Chokhmah, Yirat Hashem, is saying a greater thing than even David Amach. Is telling you that the Chokhmah and Yirat Hashem are one thing. They're inseparable. You cannot separate Chokhmah from Yirat Hashem. So I'm just going to focus on learning without Yirat Shamayim. It's impossible. It's not sayable. They're one and the same. Chokhmah and Yirat Hashem are the same thing. And that's why he ends up saying Vedat Kedushim, which is Kedusha means separation of guf from the surah in the language of the Maral, even though he doesn't say there like that. But in general, his terminology is the spiritual, otherworldliness, so to speak, the holiness of a person gives you bina. That is the Yirat Hashem and the Torah together. It makes you a holy individual. Whereas David HaMelech is just saying, Rashid Chokhmah, in the path of going towards Chokhmah, you first and foremost have to have Yirat Shamayim, right? There's a lot to say about it. I mean, there are many Gemarot. You have the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Lamed Aleph, going from Amud Aleph to Amud Bet. The Gemara there says, I think it's Rabba Bar Avhuna that says a person that has Torah and doesn't have Yirat Shamayim, what's the good mashal for it? It says it's like a gizbar that they gave him as like a guard, or any post that needs access to the whole property, that he gave him the keys to the inner rooms, to all the rooms of the property, but he didn't give him the key to the gate. Hechi ayil, the Gemara says, how is he going to get in? Right? He's not going to be able to get in. And then the Gemara brings a different member right next to it. It says he was one of the other Amoraim. I don't remember who it was. Because it says Machriz ve'amar. He would say out loud, woe to the person, right? Chaval, almi de en lo de leit le darta v'tara le darta avid. That's the language of the Gemara, right? It's chaval, such a way for someone that doesn't have a house and goes and makes a doorway, a gate. Can you imagine? It's because a flat land, nothing is there. You make a gate there. Now, it's not time to discuss. They seem to say the opposite things, right? Because the first one is suggesting that the Torah is the gate. The second one is suggesting that the Torah. Sorry, the second one is suggesting that the Torah is the gate. The first one is suggesting that the Yirat Shamayim is the gate. But both of them are saying that Torah without Yirat Shamayim is worthless, basically, right? It's not something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu desires, not something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. And again, many Gemarot of such. The Gemara says, in Masechet Brachot, of Lamed Gimel, it says, Hakol bidei Shamayim chutz mi Yirat Shamayim. Everything is in the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, aside from Yirat Shamayim. And how do we know that? Because it says, V'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel meimach. What does Hashem want from you? Kim le'yirah. The only thing He wants from you is Yirat Shamayim. Right? And the Gemara there in Shabbat that I just mentioned a minute ago ends up also saying, it says, Hen Yirat Hashem hi chokhmah. And the Gemara says, Hen belashon Yevanit means one. There's only one chokhmah, and that's Yirat Shamayim. En lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'otzrotav ela otzar shel Yirat Shamayim. The only thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has got is Yirat Shamayim. Right? You can focus so much on this area that the Yirat Shamayim is important. Right? So the Gemara says, Hakol bidei Shamayim chutz mi Yirat Shamayim. First of all, there are other things also. The Gemara, for instance, in Masechet Ketuvot, Tav Lamed, the Gemara says, Hakol b'dei shamayim chus misinim pachim. Everything is b'dei shamayim, aside from taking care of your life. From sinim pachim means heat and cold, right? You have to, Shneimar, sinim pachim b'derech ikesh, shover nafsho yirchak mehem. You have to guard your life. You have to be careful. You have to use your brains, right? So, but not speaking about that, Hakol b'dei shamayim, in a person's fate in life, everything is b'dei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. You have to choose those things that have to be b'dei shamayim. Parenthetically, I want to tell you a very interesting tshuva in the letters of the Rambam. He wrote the Rambam. He got a question from a person called Rabbi Obadiah Hager Tzedek, Ishmaeli, right? Probably it was Abdullah before, and then it became Obadiah. And he asked 3 questions to the Rambam. One of them was that he had, in all 3, he had machloket with his Rebbe, with his rabbi. And his rabbi apparently had cursed him out and called him names for being foolish and holding how he holds. So he brought the 2 sides to the Rambam. And Rambam, boy, he gives it to this rabbi. He says, your Rebbe made such a big mistake, and he was sorry, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like Reader's Digest. This a lot of the Ikrot Rambam are very interesting, but this particular one is very interesting because of its content, but also because of a seeming stira with a Gemara. Right? So Rambam says, and what you said about Shidduchim, about getting married, that it should be biyadcha, in your hand, not bidei shamayim, because it is part of yirat shamayim. Who you marry has a lot to do with your yirat shamayim, with the way you're going to turn and the way you're going to do the mitzvot and so on. You're 100% correct, of course, right?
Everything is yirat.
Rambam writes this. So actually, that's a good question. Everything is yirat shamayim. I tell the chatanim. How important it is. The Gemara says in Masechet Bava Metzia Daf Nun Tet Amud Aleph that a person has to always listen to his wife. Right? It says Itetrach gus gachin velachish beudna. Even if your wife is very short, you're very tall, bend, be matriach yourself to discuss things and to listen to her. The Gemara says, this is Mili de Alma, it's talking about worldly things, Mili de Shmaya, in things of Shamayim, in spiritual issues, you make this final decision is yours, even after discussion and so on. And in Mili de Beta, right, it's hers. And the Gemara says, some say, not just Mili de Beta, but Mili de Alma, all of the physical aspects, not just the household, right? So I tell this to people, and I tell them that Shlomo Orbach in Yichud Room, he told his wife that this is from his anava and the humility. He said, I tend to be a very decisive person, and I have my shitas in life. So therefore, to prevent any issues, for the first 10 years, you make all the decisions, right? So that's the anava and the tzidkut of his. But I tell some people, tell their wife that the Gemara says, miri de alma, miri de beta. So all the miri de beta, you make a decision. All the miri de alma, I make a decision. And then they turn to the rabbi and say, but I'm very talented. I could turn everything to be a mili de shmaya, right? Like if you're talented enough, you could, show her how everything could actually affect your ruchnius, and then you get to, so of course that's not going to be the case in Yirat Shamayim. There are certain things that your job is your this, is your that. It's the decisions that you have to make. But Rambam claims that this is Mili Dishmai, it's Yirat Shamayim. Kol B'Dishamayim Chutz Mirat Shamayim covers this as well. Now the obvious question I had when I read this somewhere, I was extremely disturbed. Because the Gemara says, in many places, the Gemara says in Masechet Sotah Daf Bet, right, that when a person is born, the bat kol comes, right, 40 yom kodem yetzirat havelad. There's a bat kol that comes out, and it says bat ploni le ploni, right, bait ploni le ploni, sedeh ploni le ploni. So it seems to be predetermined, right? And the Gemara goes further in Masechet Moed Katan, Daf Yud Chet. The Gemara there says that you could be mekadesh and isha even in the period of time that's avelut, right? In the 3 weeks. And the Gemara says, why? Because shema yikadimenu acher berachami. Maybe someone else is going to beat you to it. And the Gemara says, what does that mean exactly, berachami? The Gemara brings the story of Rava that saw a fellow that was davening to Hashem to get a very specific person, a certain girl. And Rava tells him, don't do that. He says, don't daven like that. Because mimanafshach, if it's yours, it's not going to go away from you. And if it's not yours, then kafarta b'Hashem. Then Hashem's not going to give it to you. And kafarta b'Hashem. So, based on that, the Rishonim ask, and it's a three-way machloket, what exactly it means? Shema yekademenu acher berachami. What do you mean someone with a tefillah is going to get her, right? So Rashi says, mikoach this, that the davening is not that he's going to marry her. The davening is going to be that I want this girl so badly that Hashem, if you're not giving it to me, either kill me or kill her. I can't see her marry somebody else. That's what it means, Shema yekademenu acher berachami. That's what Rashi. What's forcing Rashi to say this? Of course, what we mentioned before, right? The Ritva says, I believe. Okay, I have to check this. I haven't seen this for 20 years, but the Ritva, I think, he says that means that you're going to get it, you're going to get her, but it's not going to work out, and they're going to get divorced afterwards, right? It's not going to be a good shidduch. Eno oler yafe, right? And then the Rif in Yaakov says a third pshat, very similar to the second, that with extreme tefillah you could maybe stop it, you could change it a little bit, but it's not going to be a good ending. A little bit different than Ritva, but similar. But from all this, you see that it seems to be pretty set, right? So what's Rambam talking about? So actually, the Tashbetz, right? There was a Rabbi in Algeria, one of the Gedolei Rishonim. He, in the first Shuvah, I think it is in the Chelek Bet of Tashbetz. Again, you could check these things yourself afterwards, see if it's accurate or not. But I don't remember it clearly. But I think it's the first Shuvah in the second Chelek of Tashbetz. He asks a number of questions in this Rambam, but he doesn't ask this one question, the major question. But the Maaseh, the truth is, according to a Meiri, you could understand the Rambam. Meiri writes, right, that this is not conventional, and people don't like to hear it. But the Meiri writes it. The Meiri writes that the Gemara that says Bat Ploni Ploni and this whole thing that's set beforehand and so on is talking about Bizmanam, that they used to get married ketanim, right? Like the Gemara says, it's a mitzvah that a person should be marrying off their children samuch lepirkan. The Tosfot says samuch lepirkan is before and close to bar and bat mitzvah, right? So then, because they don't have their own sechel, and Hashem makes sure there's a certain hashgacha to make sure that they marry the right person, right? That's what the Gemara means. But once they grow up and they don't get married, and now they've developed their own minds, that haftacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not necessarily apply, because you're making the decisions for your life that it's going to affect your Yirat Shamayim in many different ways, and you could choose a totally different path than what I had in mind. So this is going to be up for grabs as well. So that's basically pretty much, when that's not his language, but that's pretty much the idea that the Meiri introduces. But that's, again, just an interesting piece of information on what Yirat Shamayim means exactly. Things of Yirat Shamayim, according to many Rishonim, the Rambam included, includes all of the things that could affect the level of your attachment to Hashem, which is part of Yirat Shamayim that we are discussing over here. Okay.
Was it Rambam or the Gemara that said to daven like a certain way for? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
So the Gemara says in Moed Katan Daf Yud Chet, it says don't daven insisting on a specific person because you don't know if it's yours or not, right? It's Gemara. The Gemara says, Rava says if it's yours, it's not going to go away. You're going to get it, and if it's not yours, then kafarta b'Hashem, because you're not going to get it, and then you're gonna develop problems with your emunah to Hashem because you think, I davened so much and it didn't happen, right?
Isn't there an Indian of the brachot that are coming to you? You're supposed to daven anyway. That opens up the.
No, you should daven. He just says, don't daven insisting on an individual person. He says, I want this girl. But davka. So you don't know if it's good for you.
Can you make it contingent if it's good for me?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. Actually, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, in Mishnat Rabbi Aaron, I think it's Chalik Bet, he writes, in explaining the concept of tefillah, he says that tefillah actually, again, there's a lot to explain in that Mishnah Rabbi Aaron, because some of the sources in Chazal that I just mentioned in the past 5 minutes seem to contradict that. He seems to feel that nothing bad could be caused by tefillah. Tefillah, the way he understands the mechanism of tefillah is for a whole different shiur. He feels that nothing bad could be caused, but certainly contingent. You can make it contingent that I don't understand, I don't know, but I think this is good for me. So if it's good for me, make it happen. Because that doesn't have the problem the Gemara says. You're not going to be kofar b'Hashem. If it doesn't happen, you say, okay, fine, it wasn't meant to me.
The reason I heard was, the first reason you said is that if it's not for you, it's not right. But another reason is that tefillah is so powerful that even if it's not good for you, it could be completely false. It would just be something that somebody said. And
that's what the Ritva says. The Ritva says
that it wasn't meant for you, but now you prayed so much that Hashem gave it to you, and now you're going to not be good for you.
Right, so that's the Ritva. The Ritva and that Gemara says how do you understand this with the concept of bashert? And the Ritva says, with extreme level of tefillah, you could get it, but it's not going to be good for you. Hashem's going to give it to you, right? That's what he says. Hashem listens to the tzaddikim, right? Our Rabbi used to say this, and he gives them what they want. They ask, Hashem feels good, and then he says, when they start, then he gives it to them. They start screaming, say, what was this? Hashem he listens to them, he takes it away. So sometimes you're better off not to scream in the beginning, not to want it. But again, the concept of understanding that certain things are, in long-term good for me. There's what Chazal call a derech ketzara v'aruka versus a derech aruka u'ktzara, right? Some pathway, it's in the beginning, it's asphalt, beautiful, gorgeous, with waterfalls and this, but you go half a mile, and then the rest of the 400 miles is going to be all sand and robbers and who knows what, right? And then you have another one that for first half a mile is garbage, and then the rest of it is great, right? Which one? A wise man has the perspective of Chacham Haroet Anolad and sees the future, and you go derech ketzara v'aruka, derech aruka u'ktzara.
Where is that from?
What's that? This is actually a Masechet Derech Eretz, and he brings this, I believe, from Rabbi Eliezer Agadol. It's one of the things that he learned. I believe it's him. One of the three things that he learned from a katan. This was an issue that he learned from a little kid, that when he asked for direction, and they told him this way is arucha u'ktzara, this way is ketzara v'aruka. And again, the wise decision is to go with that one. But Zat Hashem, we'll leave it here, and we will start again from Perek Dalet. Next week, obviously, it's going to be no shiur, but we'll pick it up as Zat Hashem in 2 weeks.
Thank you.